An heiress in disguise gave her virginity to a blind billionaire. Hi, my very beautiful and loyal family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories. This is my third story today, and I am very tired, but my mission is to grow this channel back to the heights it was a month ago. Let's start with a beautiful prayer for my most loving family. Heavenly Father, bless my beautiful family with love, peace, and endless joy. Protect them, guide them, and fill their hearts with strength and hope. May they always walk in favor and happiness. Amen. Are you happy with my comeback? Are you liking, commenting, and sharing each video? Comment, I am satisfied if you are. Let's start with love. Chapter 1, Hidden Identity. The boardroom of Onyx Beauty Enterprises fell silent as Zephyrus slammed her palm against the polished mahogany table. The quarterly profit reports scattered, and 10 executive faces turned toward her in shock. "Is this all we are?" she demanded, her voice carrying the authority that came from being the sole heir to a billion-dollar empire. Numbers on spreadsheets and market share percentages? Harrison Wells, the silver-haired CFO who had worked for her father for 30 years, cleared his throat. "Ms. Onyx, the shareholders expect profits at any cost," Zephyrus interrupted, straightening to her full height. But what about our responsibility to our consumers, to the communities where we source ingredients?" She turned toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, her reflection superimposed over the cityscape. Designer suit perfectly, tailored to her athletic frame, hair styled in elaborate braids that had taken hours that morning. The woman staring back at her looked powerful, confident, a stranger. 3 hours later, Zephyrus sat across from Drake in Le Bernardin, watching as he scanned the wine list with the same attention he gave to investment portfolios. The diamond ring on her finger caught the light, feeling heavier than it had when he'd proposed 2 months ago. "I was thinking we should move the wedding up," Drake said without looking up. "My father's contacts at the plaza could make it happen by spring instead of fall." "Why the rush?" Zephyrus asked, studying the man she'd agreed to marry. Handsome, Yale-educated, from a good family, as her father had emphasized repeatedly. Drake finally met her eyes with the practiced smile that had once made her heart race. "The merger between your father's company and our investment group would benefit from the public relations boost. Plus," he reached for her hand, "I can't wait to make you Mrs. Wellington." Something cold settled in Zephyrus' stomach. "The merger, that's what this is about?" "Among other things," he said smoothly. "Our marriage brings together 2 powerful families. It's strategic." "Strategic," she repeated, the word tasting bitter. "Do you love me, Drake?" His hesitation lasted only a fraction of a second, but it was enough. "Of course, you're beautiful, intelligent, and the Onyx name carries significant weight," she finished for him, sliding the ring off her finger. "Financial weight." The argument that followed ended with Zephyrus leaving the restaurant alone, the diamond ring abandoned beside Drake's untouched foie gras. She instructed her driver to take her home, but halfway there, she changed her mind. "Anywhere," she told him, "just drive." Dawn found her at the shore, watching waves crash against the sand in a small coastal town she'd never heard of before seeing its exit sign off the highway. Exhaustion pulled at her, but something else pushed back, something like possibility. The small art gallery caught her eye as she wandered the waking boardwalk. A help wanted sign hung in the window. On impulse, Zephyrus pushed the door open, setting a small bell tinkling. "We're not open yet," called a voice from the back. "You're about the position," Zephyrus replied, surprising herself. An elderly woman with silver dreadlocks emerged, eyeing Zephyrus' rumpled designer suit with amusement. "You don't look like someone who needs a part-time job teaching art classes." Zephyrus considered lying, but found she couldn't. "I don't need it, but I think I might want it." The woman, who introduced herself as Eleanor, studied her with shrewd eyes. can you paint?" In answer, Zephyra pulled out her phone and showed Eleanor her private portfolio, paintings she'd created in the studio. She maintained in secret, away from her father's disapproving gaze and the expectations of the society she inhabited. "You have talent," Eleanor acknowledged, "and pain. Those make for a good teacher." She cocked her head. "But you're running from something." "Everyone here probably has a past," Zephyra countered. Eleanor's laugh was warm. "True enough. What should I call you?" Zephyra hesitated. "Zara," she said finally, her mother's middle name feeling right on her tongue. Just Zara. By sunset, Zephyra Onyx had disappeared. In her place, Zara Johnson had rented a small cottage overlooking the beach, using cash withdrawn before she ditched her credit cards and phone. The cottage came with a sunroom perfect for converting into a studio. The furnishings were shabby but clean, nothing like the Egyptian cotton and custom furniture of her Manhattan penthouse. She sat on the worn porch steps, watching purple and orange streaks paint the horizon. For the first time in years, no one expected anything from her. No board meetings, no charity galas, no society pages tracking her every move. Her father would be looking for her by now. The thought sent a pang through her chest, but not enough to make her reconsider. She'd left a brief note. "I need time. Please don't look for me. I'm safe." Would he honor her request? Unlikely. Vincent Onyx wasn't accustomed to not getting his way, but she'd been careful, paid cash, used her mother's name, chosen a town so small and unremarkable that no one would think to look for a cosmetics heiress here. Inside the cottage, Zara now, removed the tailored blazer that still smelled faintly of Le Bernardin's rarefied air. She hung it in the closet beside the few simple items she'd purchased at the local clothing store. The contrast between them seemed to embody the choice before her. She could call her driver right. Now return to Manhattan and slip back into the life prescribed for her since birth. The path of least resistance. Or she could stay, become Zara Johnson, art teacher with no past and an uncertain future. A text alert broke the silence, her new prepaid phone, the number known only to Eleanor. "Classes start Monday, 10 a.m. Advanced. Students, don't be late," Zephyra smiled, something lightening in her chest. She typed back, "I'll be there." She stepped into the small bathroom, studying her reflection in the spotted mirror. The woman who stared back still looked like Zephyra Onyx, cosmetics heiress and Manhattan socialite. With determined movements, she unbound her elaborate braids, letting her natural curls spring free. Tomorrow, she would be someone new, someone real. For tonight, she set up a canvas on the rickety easel she'd purchased, mixed paints on a chipped plate, and began to create something that came from within rather than from expectation. Outside, waves crashed against the shore in a rhythm as old as time, washing away footprints, smoothing rough edges, making everything new with each receding tide. Chapter 2. First encounter. 3 weeks into her new life, Zephyra, now comfortably, entering to Zara, found her rhythm in Seabrook Cove. Mornings were spent at Eleanor's gallery, teaching art classes. Afternoons working on her own paintings, and evenings walking the shoreline as the sun descended in spectacular displays. On this particular evening, the sky blazed with shades of amber and gold that reflected off the water. Zephyra had kicked off her sandals, allowing the cool sand to sift between her toes as she walked. The simple pleasure would have been unthinkable in her previous life, where appearances always mattered more than experiences. The sound reached her first. Piano. Notes carried on the breeze, a melody so complex and moving that she found herself following it as if enchanted. The music led her to a modern beach house built of glass and weathered wood that seemed to rise organically from the dunes. Through the expansive windows, she could see a man at a grand piano, his profile strong and defined against the sunset backdrop. His fingers moved across the keys with graceful precision, coaxing forth emotions that seemed to mirror the dramatic sky. Without conscious decision, Zephyra moved closer. She must have made some sound, because suddenly the music stopped, and the man lifted his head. "Hello?" he called, his voice deep and resonant. "Someone's there, aren't they?" Embarrassed at being caught eavesdropping, Zephyra stepped onto the deck. "I'm sorry for intruding. Your music was beautiful. I just followed it without thinking." The man turned toward her voice, and Zephyra noticed something unusual in the way his gaze didn't quite focus on her. He was strikingly handsome, with strong features and dark hair that curled slightly at the temples, but it was his eyes that captured her attention, deep brown and expressive, yet somehow distant. "No intrusion," he replied with a small smile. "Music is meant to be heard. I'm Caius Thornfield." "Zara Johnson," she responded automatically, the false name now feeling natural on her tongue. "I'm new to Seabrook." Caius nodded, still not quite looking directly at her. "What brought you to our little corner of nowhere?" "A chance to start over," she answered honestly. His smile deepened, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "The best reason to come anywhere." He gestured toward the deck chairs. "Would you like to sit?" I was about to take a break anyway. As Zephyra settled into the offered chair, Caius moved with careful precision to a small refrigerator built into the deck's outdoor kitchen. "Water? Wine? I have both." "Water would be nice, thank you." She watched as he retrieved 2 bottles, noting how his fingers lingered slightly longer than necessary on objects, how he counted steps under his breath. When he returned, offering her the bottle with remarkable accuracy, she took it and asked, "How long have you been blind?" Caius paused, then chuckled softly. "Most people dance around that question for at least 10 minutes. I appreciate your directness." He settled into the chair beside her. 5 years, 2 months, and approximately 17 days. Not that I'm counting. The gentle self-deprecation in his tone made Zephyra smile. Was it sudden? Very. An accident? Something flickered across his face, pain perhaps, or resignation. One day I was seeing the world in all its chaotic glory, and the next, darkness. He took a sip of water. But we adapt. Humans are remarkably resilient creatures. The conversation flowed easily after that. Caius asked questions about her art, seeming genuinely interested in her descriptions of color and composition. Zephyra found herself speaking more freely than she had with anyone in years, perhaps because his blindness removed the judgment she usually felt under others' gazes. "So you teach at Eleanor's gallery?" he asked. I should have connected the dots. She mentioned hiring someone new. You know Eleanor. Small town, he smiled. Plus, I teach music at the community center where she volunteers. Music and art programs often intertwine here. The sky had darkened to deep indigo by the time Zephyra realized how long they'd been talking. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "It's getting late." Caius stood with her. "Do you live far? I'd offer to walk you home, but I might not be much protection against." "Well, anything, really," Zephyra laughed. "I'm just up the beach, and I suspect you'd be more capable than you let on." "Perhaps," he conceded with that dimpled smile. "Will you come again sometime? I enjoy playing for an audience, especially one that appreciates the nuances." "I'd like that," she responded, surprised by how much she meant it. As she turned to leave, Caius called after her. "Zara, one question. Entirely selfish on my part." She paused. "Yes? Would you mind describing yourself to me? When I speak with someone, I like to have an image in my mind." The request caught her off guard. In her previous life, people had only ever seen her exterior, her designer clothes, her carefully maintained appearance, the onyx name that preceded her everywhere. How would she describe herself when all those trappings were stripped away? I'm tall, she began hesitantly. My skin is the color of burnished mahogany. I have eyes that my mother used to say were like amber with firelight behind them. She touched her hair self-consciously. Since coming here, I've been wearing my hair natural. Lots of curls that have a mind of their own. Caius listened intently, his head slightly tilted. When she finished, he nodded as if confirming something to himself. Thank you. That helps. What about you? She asked impulsively. How would you describe yourself? His smile turned wry. 6'1", according to my driver's license, though I was hoping for another growth spurt that never materialized. Dark hair that's probably too long now because I keep forgetting to schedule a haircut. Strong nose, broke it twice playing rugby in college. And eyes that apparently still look normal enough that people sometimes forget they don't work. The self-assessment was delivered with such good humor that Zephira felt a warm appreciation for this man who could speak of his disability without bitterness. Good night, Caius Thornfield, she said softly. Thank you for the music and conversation. Good night, Zara Johnson. The shore path is 3 steps directly in front of you, just in case you've lost your bearings while listening to me ramble. Walking back along the moonlit beach, Zephira realized she was smiling. For the first time since arriving in Seabrook, she had connected with someone without fear of discovery or judgment. The irony wasn't lost on her. A woman hiding her. True identity, finding genuine connection with a man who couldn't see her facade. As her cottage came into view, silhouetted against the star-filled sky, Zephira felt something stir within her, something that felt dangerously like hope. Chapter 3. Growing Connection. Ms. Johnson, is this better? 10-year-old Lily held up her watercolor, water dripping from oversaturated paper. The child's earnest expression made Zephira smile as she crouched beside the small table. It's beautiful, Lily. See how the colors blend where they're still wet? That's exactly what we wanted. She guided the girl's hand. Now let's add just a touch of blue here in the corner. Eleanor watched from the doorway as Zephira moved among the children, offering encouragement and gentle correction in equal measure. When the class ended and parents arrived to collect their budding artists, the gallery owner approached. You've got a gift for teaching, she observed. These kids adore you. Zephira shrugged, collecting abandoned paintbrushes. They make it easy. Children just want to be seen and heard. Don't we all? Eleanor replied cryptically. By the way, the community center called. They're looking for someone to help with their summer arts program. I recommended you. Zephira paused. I don't know, Eleanor. I'm still settling in here. It's just 2 afternoons a week, Eleanor pressed. Besides, you might enjoy working with Caius Thornfield. He runs the music program there. Zephira's head snapped up. Caius? Eleanor's knowing smile suggested she hadn't missed the reaction. Tall drink of water with the sightless eyes and the piano hands? Heard you two met on the beach last week? News travels fast in small towns, Zephira muttered. Honey, in Seabrook, gossip is the only thing that travels faster than the tide. The community centre occupied a converted Victorian home at the edge of town. When Zephira arrived the following Tuesday, she heard Caius before she saw him, his rich voice interspersed with children's laughter, and underneath it all, the steady rhythm of a djembe drum. She followed the sounds to a sunlit room where Caius sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by a semicircle of children, each with small percussion instruments. One boy pounded enthusiastically on a djembe that nearly swallowed his small frame. Easy, Marcus, Caius laughed. Remember, we're creating a rainstorm, not a hurricane. His sensitive hearing caught Zephira's entrance. We have a visitor, everyone. A dozen young faces turned toward her. Zephira waved awkwardly. I'm Zara Johnson. I'll be helping with the art program. Perfect timing. Caius smiled in her direction. We're creating a rainstorm soundscape. Perhaps you could help us visualize it. He gestured toward art supplies piled on a table. Everyone, while I work with Marcus on his rhythm, Ms. Johnson will help you draw the storm we're creating." The integration of their lessons happened so naturally that Zephyra barely noticed the transition. By the time parents began arriving, the walls were adorned with storm paintings, each uniquely beautiful, and the children had mastered a percussion piece that genuinely evoked rainfall. That was... Zephyra searched for the right word as she... And Caius cleaned up. "Magic," he suggested, deftly sorting musical instruments by touch. I was going to say unexpected, but yes, magic works too. She placed a misplaced tambourine in his hands. "You're amazing with them." "Children are the most honest audience," he replied. "They don't pity the blind music teacher or marvel at how I've overcome my disability. They just want to know if I can make something beautiful with them." Later they walked along the shore path together, Zephyra occasionally warning Caius of driftwood or describing particularly striking cloud formations. The initial awkwardness had dissolved into comfortable companionship. "Same time Thursday?" Caius asked as they reached the point where their paths diverged. "I'll be there," Zephyra promised. Their collaborative classes quickly became the highlight of Zephyra's week. She found herself looking forward to Tuesdays and Thursdays with an anticipation that surprised her. Caius's creativity sparked her own, and together they developed lessons that engaged even the most restless children. One stormy afternoon a month later, they found themselves alone in the community center after classes were cancelled due to weather. Warnings. Rain lashed against the windows as they sheltered in the music room. "I should head back before it gets worse," Zephyra said, peering out at the darkening sky. "Or you could stay," Caius suggested, his hands moving across piano keys in an absent melody. "I'm told a spectacular nor'easter is brewing. Nobody should be walking the shore path in that." Thunder punctuated his words as if on cue. Zephyra laughed. "Point taken. I suppose I'm stranded here with you." "Terrible fate," he teased. "Trapped with a man who can't even appreciate how beautiful you look today." The casual compliment caught her off guard. "How do you know I look beautiful?" Caius's fingers paused on the keys. "Your voice changes when you're well-rested and content. It has a lightness to it, and you smell like ocean air and turpentine today, which means you painted on the beach this morning." Zephyra stared at him, astonished. "That's creepy," he winced. "Perceptive," she corrected. "I did paint at sunrise. The light was extraordinary." Caius shifted on the piano bench, patting the space beside him. "Describe it to me?" Zephyra hesitated only briefly before joining him. Their shoulders touched as she settled beside him, sending an unexpected warmth through her body. "The horizon was silver at first," she began, closing her eyes to recall the scene. "Then, as the sun broke through, everything turned gold and pink. The water looked like liquid metal." "Creepy," he winced. As she spoke, Caius began to play, his composition following the rhythm of her words, translating her visual memory into sound. The music swelled and softened, mirroring the sunrise she described. "That's it, exactly," she whispered, when both her words and his music faded. "How did you do that?" "Music and visual art aren't so different," he replied softly. "Both speak a language beyond words." They sat in silence, the storm raging outside, while something equally powerful stirred between them. Without thinking, Zephyra placed her hand over his on the piano keys. "Would you play something else for me?" she asked. His fingers turned beneath hers, intertwining them briefly before returning to the keys. This is something new, still unfinished. The melody that emerged was unlike anything she'd heard him play before, tender yet complex, with an underlying current of longing. Zephyra closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her, feeling as though he was showing her a part of himself that few had seen. When the final notes faded, she opened her eyes to find Caius's face turned toward her closer than she'd realized. "What inspired that piece?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the rain. His expression softened. "Do you really need to ask?" The air between them seemed charged with possibility. Slowly, with deliberate care, Caius raised his hand to her face, his fingers tracing the contours of her cheek with gentle precision. "May I?" he murmured. Zephyra nodded, then remembering, whispered, "Yes." His touch was reverent as his fingertips mapped her features, the arch of her eyebrows, the slope of her nose, the curve of her lips. It was the most intimate moment Zephyra had ever experienced, more revealing than any kiss. "You're smiling," he observed, his thumb tracing the corner of her mouth. "Yes," she admitted, "because of me." The vulnerability in the question made her heart ache. Instead of answering, Zephyra leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but deepened as Caius's arms encircled her, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, the storm outside seemed to have receded, or perhaps they simply no longer noticed it. "That," Caius said quietly, his forehead resting against hers, "was worth waiting for." Zephyra closed her eyes, savoring the moment, while trying to ignore the voice in her head, reminding her that their connection was built on a foundation that included her deception. For now, though, in the shelter of the music room with rain drumming against the windows, she allowed herself to simply be present in this unexpected joy. Chapter 4. Hidden Truths. The following weeks unfolded like pages from a novel Zephyra had always longed to read but never believed could exist. Mornings still began with her art classes, but evenings now often ended in Caius's arms, walking the shoreline, sharing meals on his deck, or simply sitting in comfortable silence as he played piano, and she sketched his profile against the setting sun. "You're different lately," Eleanor commented as they prepared the gallery for a weekend exhibition. "Happier." Zephyra arranged a collection of ceramic pieces with careful precision. "Is that a bad thing?" "Not at all." Eleanor studied her with those knowing eyes. "Caius is a good man, one of the best I know." "Yes," Zephyra agreed, warmth spreading through her chest at the mere mention of his name. "He is." "Just be careful with him," Eleanor added softly. "His heart has been broken before, and not just by losing his sight." The cryptic warning followed. Zephyra to the small-town library that afternoon. While searching for art books to use in her children's classes, she found herself wandering into the local history section. On impulse, she typed Caius Thornfield into the archive computer. The screen filled with results. Headlines from technology magazines, business journals, and even national newspapers appeared. Tech visionary Caius Thornfield revolutionizes adaptive technology. Thornfield Industries valued at $3.4 billion after latest innovation. Tragedy strikes tech. Giant. Thornfield blinded in boating accident. Thornfield donates majority of fortune to medical research, disappears from public life. Zephyra clicked through the articles with growing astonishment. The Caius Thornfield described in these pieces, brilliant, entrepreneur, innovative designer, philanthropist, seemed worlds away from the quiet music teacher she'd come to know. And yet, she recognized him in every achievement, every quote attributed to him. One photograph particularly captured her attention. Caius in an impeccable suit at some gala event, eyes bright and focused, smiling with confident charm as he accepted an award. She touched the screen gently, tracing the face she now knew by heart, yet had never seen quite like this, seeing and being seen in return. A folded newspaper clipping fell from between the pages of a local yearbook she was examining. The headline read, "Former Fiancé Speaks Out, How Success Changed Thornfield Before Accident." The accompanying photo showed Caius with a stunning blonde woman, her expression calculating despite the composed smile. He became obsessed with his work, with his image. The article quoted Octavia Rain, described as a former model, and Thornfield's ex-fiancée. The accident was tragic, but the man I loved was already disappearing before he lost his sight. Zephyra carefully refolded the clipping and returned it to its place, her mind racing. The irony wasn't lost on her. She, an heiress in hiding, had unwittingly fallen for a billionaire in disguise. Their parallel deceptions might have been amusing if they didn't feel so painfully consequential. That evening, she sat on her cottage porch, a blank canvas before her as the sunset painted the sky in strokes more masterful than any human hand could achieve. The weight of her secret pressed against her chest with renewed urgency. How could she tell Caius the truth now? Would he see her revelation as a betrayal, or recognize in it the same desire that had driven his own retreat, the longing to be known for oneself rather than for wealth or status? The familiar sound of Caius's cane tapping along the shore path interrupted her thoughts. They had planned to meet at his house, but he had evidently decided to surprise her. "There you are," he called, navigating the 3 steps to her porch with practiced ease. "I thought I'd walk you back for dinner." Zephyra rose to meet him, accepting his kiss with a mixture of joy and guilt. "That's quite gallant of you." "Well, I did promise to sweep you off your feet," he grinned. "Metaphorically speaking, of course. An actual attempt might end with both of us in the emergency room." His self-deprecating humor usually made her laugh, but tonight it struck a discordant note. This brilliant man, who had changed countless lives with his innovations, now joked about his limitations, as if they defined him. "Is something wrong?" Caius asked, his uncanny perception detecting her hesitation. "You seem distant, just lost in," he thought. She hedged, taking his arm. "Shall we go?" At his home, Caius surprised her with a meal clearly prepared by professional hands, but arranged by his own: steak from the local butcher, perfectly grilled vegetables, and a wine she recognized as a rare vintage that would have cost more than her monthly gallery salary. "What's the occasion?" she asked, accepting the glass he offered. "Does there need to be one?" he countered, but there was something tentative in his smile. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something." Zephyra's heart stuttered. "Oh?" Caius settled across from her, his fingers fidgeting with his napkin, a rare display of nervousness from a man usually so composed. "I haven't been entirely honest with you, Zara." The irony of his confession nearly made her laugh aloud. Instead, she reached for his hand. "About what?" "My past." He drew a deep breath. "Before I came to Seabrook, before I lost my sight, I had a different life. I know who you are, Caius," she interrupted gently, his head tilted in confusion. "You know? I found some articles in the library archives today," she admitted. "Caius Thornfield, tech innovator and billionaire philanthropist." He exhaled, slowly, tension visibly leaving his shoulders. "And you're not angry I didn't tell you?" "Why would I be?" she asked, aware of the hypocrisy in her response. "We all have parts of ourselves we keep private until we're ready to share them." Caius squeezed her hand. "I wanted you to know the real me first, the person, not the reputation or the bank account." His lips quirked. "Though I admit, the bank account is still rather substantial, despite my best efforts to give most of it away." Zephyra swallowed. Hard. Here was her opening, the perfect moment to offer her own confession. The words formed in her mind. "I understand completely, because I've done the same thing. My name isn't Zara Johnson," but the memory of his ex-fiancée's calculating smile in that photograph flashed in her mind. Would Caius see the same calculation in her actions once he knew her true identity? Would the precious connection they'd formed shatter under the weight of revelation? "Thank you for trusting me," she said instead, the unspoken truth burning like acid in her throat. Later, as they stood on his deck watching distant lightning flicker over the ocean, Caius wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chest warm, against her back. "There was another reason for tonight's dinner," he murmured, his breath tickling her ear. "It's been exactly 2 months since you followed my music down the beach." Zephyra leaned into his embrace. "You've been counting. Every day," he confirmed. "When you lose one sense, you become acutely aware of the passage of time in other ways. 2 months, 3 days, and approximately 4 hours since I heard your voice for the first time." She turned in his arms to face him. "And has it been what you expected, getting to know me?" His expression softened as his hands came up to frame her face. "It's been infinitely better. You're extraordinary, Zara Johnson." The name, her false name, spoken with such tenderness, was like a physical pain. But when his lips found hers, she allowed herself to sink into the kiss, to believe for just a little longer that their connection could survive the truth she would eventually have to reveal. That night, back in her cottage, Zephyra pulled out a sketchpad and began to write. "Dear Caius, there's something I need to tell you. My name isn't Zara Johnson, I am Zephyra Onyx." She wrote until dawn, pouring out the story of her privileged upbringing, her disillusionment with the shallow relationships that characterized her world, her flight from a loveless engagement, and her discovery of authentic connection in an unexpected place. When finished, she sealed the letter in an envelope and placed it in her dresser drawer. Not today, perhaps, but soon, before their relationship deepened further, before the inevitable truth caused irreparable damage. Outside, the first light of morning streaked across the horizon, reminding her of new beginnings and second chances. She could only hope that when the moment came to share her own truth, Caius would understand that sometimes deception could be a pathway to authenticity. Chapter 5. Shadows from the Past. The sharp ring of Zephyra's prepaid phone jolted her awake. Sunlight streamed through the cottage windows as she fumbled for the device, mind still clouded with sleep. "Hello?" she mumbled. "You need to turn on the TV right now." The voice was familiar but unexpected. Zephyra sat up straight. "Lysithea?" "Yes, it's me. Turn on any news channel, Zeph. Now!" Heart-pounding, Zephyra stumbled to the small television she rarely used. The screen flickered to life, and there was her father's face, drawn and grey beneath his usual composed exterior. Continuing our coverage of tech magnate Vincent Onyx's press conference regarding his missing daughter, cosmetics heiress, Zephyra Onyx, who disappeared over 3 months ago. "Oh my God," Zephyra whispered. "He's offering $1 million reward for information." Lysithea's voice came through the phone, still pressed to her ear. "Your face is everywhere, Zeph. It's only a matter of time before someone in your little hideaway recognizes you." The reporter's voice continued. "Sources close to the family suggest Ms. Onyx's disappearance may be connected to her broken engagement to finance heir Drake Wellington, though Mr. Onyx has dismissed these claims as trivial gossip." The camera cut to Drake, looking appropriately concerned as he spoke to reporters. "I just want Zephyra to come home safely. Whatever differences we had, her well-being is all that matters now." Zephyra shut off the television, nausea rising in her throat. "How did you find me, Lys? Please," her friend scoffed. "We've known each other since we were 6. When you disappeared, I hired a private investigator, not to bring you back, just to make sure you were safe. Does my father know?" "No, I wouldn't do that to you." There was a pause. "But Zeph, I'm worried. Your father looks terrible. He's had 2 minor heart episodes since you left." Guilt twisted in Zephyra's stomach. "I left him a note. I told him not to worry." "He's your father," Lysithea said simply. "Expecting him not to worry is like expecting the tide not to turn." After ending the call with a promise to be careful, Zephyrus sank onto her porch steps, mind racing. She needed to tell Caius the truth immediately. If he saw the news, if anyone in town recognized her from the media coverage, a knock at her. Duca interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Eleanor holding a newspaper. "You have some explaining to do," the older woman said without preamble, stepping inside and closing the door firmly behind her. Zephyra glanced at the newspaper. Her own face stared back at her from the front page, alongside the headline, "Cosmetics Heiress Still Missing, Reward Offered." "You knew," Zephyra realized, studying Eleanor's unsurprised expression. "From the second day," Eleanor confirmed, settling into a chair. "I may be old, but I read fashion magazines. The face of Onyx Beauty's Midnight Amber collection isn't easily forgotten." "Why didn't you say anything?" Eleanor shrugged. "Wasn't my business why you were hiding. You were polite, worked hard, and paid your rent on time. That's all that mattered to me. And now your picture's in every newspaper and on every television channel from here to California." Eleanor folded her arms. "People will start putting it together, especially since you haven't exactly been living like a hermit lately." Zephyra pressed her palms against her temples. "I need to tell Caius before someone else does." "Yes," Eleanor agreed gravely. "You do." But fate had other plans. As Zephyra approached Caius's house that evening, rehearsing her confession, she noticed an unfamiliar sports car in his driveway. Through the large windows, she could see Caius standing in his living room, facing a tall, elegant blonde woman whose back was to the window. Zephyra hesitated on the shore path, transfixed by the tableau. As if sensing her presence, the woman turned slightly, revealing a profile Zephyra recognized from the newspaper clipping. Octavia Rain, Caius's ex-fiancée. The smart thing would be to retreat, to wait for another moment, to have her necessary. A conversation with Caius. But before Zephyra could decide, the front door opened, and Octavia emerged onto the deck, spotting her immediately. "Hello there!" Octavia called, her voice carrying a cultivated charm that set Zephyra's teeth on edge. "You must be Zara. Kai has told me so much about you." Kai. The familiar diminutive stung like a slap. Caius appeared behind Octavia, his expression unreadable. "Zara, is that you?" "Yes," Zephyra managed, climbing the steps to the deck. "I was just coming to see you, but I can come back later if you're busy." "Nonsense," Octavia smiled with perfect white teeth. "I was just leaving." She turned to Caius. "Think about what I said, Kai. The specialists in Switzerland are the best in the world." She brushed past Zephyra, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume in her wake. As the sports car roared to life and departed, Caius reached for Zephyra's hand. "I'm sorry about that," he said quietly. "She showed up unannounced. Your ex-fiancée," Zephyra stated rather than asked, allowing him to lead her inside. Caius sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yes. We were engaged before my accident. She couldn't handle the changes afterward, and now she's back, apparently," his mouth twisted. "With promises of Swiss specialists and revolutionary treatments." Zephyra's throat tightened. "Do you believe her? That there might be treatments?" He shrugged. "Possibly. That's why she's here." "No. Octavia doesn't do anything that doesn't benefit Octavia." They settled on the couch, Zephyra acutely aware of the confession she needed to make, now complicated by this new development. "You're unusually quiet," Caius observed, his fingers finding and entwining with hers. "Is everything all right?" "Actually, there's something important I need to tell you," she began. But before she could continue, Caius's phone rang, the specialized ringtone he used for priority calls. "I'm sorry," he apologized, answering. "Yes, this is Caius Thornfield." His expression changed as he listened. "When? Are you certain?" Another pause. "I understand. Thank you for calling." He hung up, his face pale. "That was my investment manager. There's been unusual activity regarding my medical research foundation, large withdrawals and transfers I didn't authorize." Zephyr's confession died on her lips. "What does that mean?" "It means someone's trying to access funds earmarked for vision research." His jaw tightened. "And I have a strong suspicion who—" "Octavia. She has access to some of my old accounts, passwords I never changed after the accident." His hands clenched. "I need to deal with this right away." Zephira stood, her own crisis momentarily overshadowed by his. "Of course. Do you need me to drive you somewhere?" "No, I can handle this by phone." He reached for her, his expression softening. "But thank you. What was it you wanted to tell me?" "It can wait," she assured him, knowing it couldn't but unwilling to add to his burden. "Deal with this first." Over the next several days, Zephira tried repeatedly to find the right moment for her confession, but circumstances conspired against her. Caius was consumed with the financial investigation, which had indeed implicated Octavia in an attempted fraud scheme. Meanwhile, Zephira's own face continued to appear in media coverage, making ventures into town increasingly risky. Lysithea arrived unexpectedly that Friday, her designer luggage incongruous in the rustic cottage. "I had to see for myself that—" "You're okay," she explained, embracing Zephira tightly. "And to warn you, your father's hired investigators are closing in. Someone at a gallery one town over thought they recognized you at an exhibition last month." "I need to tell Caius the truth," Zephira said, for what felt like the 100th time. "Tonight, no more delays." Lysithea studied her friend's face. "You love him, don't you?" "Yes," Zephira admitted, the truth of it settling in her chest like a physical presence. "I do." "Then I hope he deserves it." Lysithea squeezed her hand. "For what it's worth, I think disappearing was the bravest thing you've ever done. You found yourself out here, Zeph. I just hope you don't lose yourself again when you go back." "Who says?" "I'm going back." Lysithea's expression grew serious. "Your father had another episode yesterday. The doctors say he needs to reduce his stress. He needs to know you're safe." The weight of responsibility settled heavily on Zephira's shoulders. Her freedom had come at a price others were paying. That evening, she invited Caius to dinner at her cottage, determined that nothing would prevent her confession this time. She prepared his favorite meal, set the table with candles, and placed the sealed letter she'd written nights ago beside his plate. But as sunset approached, storm clouds gathered, mirroring her turbulent emotions. The rain began just as headlights appeared in her driveway, not Caius's usual driver, but a sleek black town car. Both Lysithea and Zephira froze as the car door opened and a tall, elegant woman emerged, hurrying through the rain toward the cottage. "Octavia," Zephira whispered. Recognizing the blonde despite the weather, Lysithea's eyebrows rose. "The ex-fiancée? What's she doing here?" Before either could speculate further, another car appeared, Caius's driver this time. Zephira watched in horror as both Caius and Octavia converged on her porch, neither aware of the other until the last moment. "What are you doing here?" Caius demanded when Octavia greeted him, his voice audible through the window. "I could ask you the same thing," Octavia replied coolly, "though I suspect we're both here for similar reasons, to speak with Zara." The emphasis she placed on the name sent ice through Zephira's veins. Before Zephira could reach the door, Octavia had opened it herself, rain dripping from her expensive coat as she stepped inside. Her gaze swept from Zephira to Lysithea and back, a triumphant smile spreading across her perfect features. "Hello, Miss Onyx," she said sweetly. "Or do you prefer Zara these days?" Behind her, Caius's face drained of color. "What did you just call her?" "Oh," Octavia turned to him with feigned surprise. "Didn't she tell you? You've been romancing Zephira Onyx, heiress to the Onyx beauty empire." Quite a step up from a small-town art teacher, wouldn't you say? Caius, Zephyra stepped forward, reaching for him. Please, let me explain. But Caius stepped back, his expression shuddering. Explain what? That you've been lying to me since the day we met, that everything between us has been based on deception. No, Zephyra protested, tears forming. What's between us is real. My name isn't real, but everything else. How would I know? He interrupted, his voice hollow. I can't see your face to know if you're lying now. I trusted what I could perceive. Your voice, your words, your touch, but it seems even those were masks. Octavia watched their exchange with undisguised satisfaction before turning to Zephyra. Your father is offering a substantial reward for information about your whereabouts. I wonder what he'll give me for delivering you personally. Lysithea stepped forward, her expression fierce. Get out, she commanded Octavia, before I call the police and report you for the attempted fraud Caius already knows about. Octavia's smile faltered. You wouldn't dare. Try me, Lysithea challenged. I have the direct number for the Financial Crimes Division on speed dial. Corporate law has its perks. With a final venomous glance, Octavia swept out the door, leaving behind an oppressive silence broken only by the sound of rain and Zephyra's shallow breathing. Caius, she tried again, her voice breaking. Please, I need to go, he said, his face turned away from her voice. I need to think. As he turned to leave, Zephyra pressed the letter into his hand. At least read this, please. He hesitated, then pocketed the envelope before walking carefully down the steps to where his driver waited. Zephyra watched through tear-blurred vision as the car disappeared into the stormy night. Well, Lysithea said quietly, wrapping an arm around Zephyra's shaking shoulders. That could have gone better. Outside, the storm intensified, waves crashing against the shore with furious intensity. But Zephyra barely noticed, her heart breaking with the certainty that she had lost the one person who had truly seen her, even without sight. Chapter 6. Intimate Revelations. 3 days passed without word from Caius. Zephyra moved through her, routine mechanically, teaching her classes, responding to concerned inquiries from Eleanor, and avoiding the increasingly frequent news vans that appeared at the edges of the small town. Lysithea remained at the cottage, fielding calls from Vincent Onyx with practiced evasions, while urging Zephyra to consider returning to New York. You can't hide forever, Lysithea reasoned as they shared a quiet dinner, especially now that the press is sniffing around Seabrook. I know, Zephyra admitted, pushing food around her plate without appetite. But I need to speak with Caius. Before I go anywhere, I can't leave things like this. Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock. Lysithea peered through the window. It's him, she announced, giving Zephyra's shoulder a supportive squeeze before retreating to the bedroom. I'll make myself scarce. Zephyra took a steadying breath before opening the door. Caius stood on her porch, his face drawn with exhaustion, rain dampening his hair and clothes, despite the umbrella his driver held over him from the bottom of the steps. May I come in? He asked formally. Of course. She stepped aside, heart hammering against her ribs. Caius navigated her small living room with surprising accuracy, finding a chair without assistance. When he was seated, he dismissed his driver. With a quiet word. I read your letter, he said once they were alone. Several times, actually. I had my assistant read it to me, then had it converted to Braille. Zephyra perched on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tightly in her lap. And I'm still trying to understand, he admitted. Not who you are. Your letter explained that quite thoroughly, but why you continued the deception for so long. We had so many moments where you could have told me the truth. I was afraid, she whispered. At first it was just about maintaining my escape, but then I met you, and we connected in a way I'd never experienced before. I was terrified that telling you would change everything. It has changed everything, he pointed out. I know. Tears pricked at her eyes. "And I'm so sorry for that. But please believe that nothing about my feelings for you was ever false." Outside, the storm that had been threatening all day finally broke. Rain lashed against the windows as lightning illuminated the cottage in brief, brilliant flashes. "The irony isn't lost on me," Kaya said after a long silence, "both of us hiding aspects of our past, seeking genuine connection." His mouth twisted in a humorless smile. "I was angry at first, furious actually, but then I realized my reaction was more about my own insecurities than your deception." Zephira leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "When Octavia left after my accident, she made it clear that a blind man wasn't what she had signed up for, not the glamorous tech billionaire she wanted to parade at galas." His hands clenched on his knees. "Part of me has been waiting for you to realize the same thing, that loving a blind man means certain compromises." "Caius, when I discovered who you really are," he continued, "my first thought wasn't betrayal. It was resignation. Of course, you wouldn't stay. Why would Zephira Onyx, heiress to billions, choose a life with limitations when she could return to a world of privilege?" The raw vulnerability in his voice broke something open inside Zephira. She moved to kneel before him, taking his hands in hers. "That world nearly suffocated me," she said fiercely. "I've spent my life surrounded by people who see only what I represent: wealth, status, the Onyx name. Until you're the only person who has ever truly seen me, Caius." His fingers tightened around hers. "I can't see you at all," he reminded her, a note of bitter humor in his voice. "You see me more clearly than anyone ever has," she insisted. "You know my heart, my dreams, my fears. Those are the parts of me that matter." The storm outside intensified, a particularly violent gust rattling the windows. Lysithea appeared briefly. "In the doorway. The power's out in half the town," she reported. "I'm going to check on Eleanor. She doesn't do well in storms." She grabbed her coat, giving Zephira a meaningful look before slipping out the door. Left alone, Zephira and Caius sat in darkness broken only by occasional lightning flashes and the candles Zephira hastily lit. "I've never seen a storm like this," she murmured, returning to sit beside him. "I haven't seen one at all in 5 years," he replied with that self-deprecating humor she'd grown to love. Something in the candlelight, in the howling wind outside that made the cottage feel like the last safe place on earth, created an intimacy that dissolved the remaining tension between them. Zephira found herself telling Caius everything. Her childhood in the shadow of her mother's early death, her father's emotional distance, the endless parade of people who wanted something from the Onyx name, but never from Zephira herself. In turn, Caius spoke of his own journey, the accident that took his sight, the painful realization of who remained loyal when his circumstances changed, his struggle to redefine his purpose when everything he had built his identity around was stripped away. "I think we found each other at exactly the right moment," Zephira said softly, "when we both needed to be seen for who we really are." "Zephira," he spoke her real name for the first time, the syllables caressed in his deep voice. "I believe that's true." He reached for her in the darkness, his hand finding her face with unerring accuracy. His touch was gentle as he traced the contours of her features, as if relearning her through this new knowledge. "Your name may be different," he murmured, "but you feel the same beneath my fingertips." When his hand reached her lips, Zephira turned, her face to press a kiss into his palm. The simple gesture ignited something that had been building between them for months. A connection deeper than physical attraction, more profound than the chemistry that had always sparked between them. As the storm raged outside, they found their way to each other with deliberate tenderness. Each touch, each kiss was a revelation, a wordless communication of trust restored. "I've never Zephyra breathed against his neck as his hands explored the curves of her body with reverent care. Caius stilled, drawing back slightly. Never? No, she admitted. There were relationships before, but never anyone I trusted enough. Never anyone who saw me, the real me. His expression in the flickering candlelight was one of awe and profound responsibility. "We don't have to—" "I want to," she interrupted with certainty. "I want you, Caius, all of you." Their coming together was unhurried, despite the storm's violence outside. Caius's blindness became not a limitation, but an enhancement. His heightened senses, allowing him to respond to her every reaction, every quickened breath, every tremor of pleasure. His gentleness, as he guided her through this new territory, made Zephyra's heart expand with emotions too complex to name. When they finally joined completely, the last barriers between them dissolved. The physical union mirrored the emotional one they had been building since that first evening on the beach, a recognition of souls that transcended sight, wealth, past deceptions, and future uncertainties. Afterward, they lay entwined as rain continued to drum against the roof, the worst of the storm passing, but its energy still palpable in the air around them. "I love you," Zephyra whispered against his chest, the words she had held back for so long finally finding voice. "Not Caius Thornfield, the tech billionaire, or the musician, or even the man who sees me clearly. Just you. All of you." His arms tightened around her. "And I love you, Zephyra, Zara, whatever name you choose. I love the woman whose voice I followed, out of darkness, whose heart I've come to know as well as my own." In the sanctuary they had created together, the outside world with all its complications seemed distant and unimportant. For this one perfect night, there were no heiresses or billionaires, no blindness or sight, no past deceptions or future challenges, only two people who had found in each other exactly what they never knew they were looking for. As Zephyra drifted towards sleep in Caius's embrace, she allowed herself to believe, just for this moment, that love really could be enough to overcome whatever lay ahead, a faith as powerful and cleansing as the storm that had washed the world clean outside. Chapter 7. Truth unveiled, morning light filtered through the cottage windows, painting warm patterns across the rumpled sheets. Zephyra awakened slowly, her body pleasantly sore in unfamiliar ways, her heart fuller than she'd ever known possible. Beside her, Caius slept peacefully, his features relaxed in a way she rarely saw when he was awake and guarded. She traced the line of his jaw with her gaze, memorizing every detail. For the first time since arriving in Seabrook, Zephyra felt completely herself. No deception, no hiding, no fear that discovery would shatter everything she'd built. Caius knew the truth, and still he had stayed. Still he had loved her, carefully. Slipping from the bed, she wrapped herself in a robe and padded to the kitchen to prepare coffee. Outside, the storm-washed world gleamed with renewed clarity. Debris scattered across the beach, the only evidence of the previous night's tempest. The sound of a car door closing outside made her pause. Through the window, she saw Lysithea approaching, newspaper clutched in her hand, expression grim. "What is it?" Zephyra asked as her friend entered without knocking. Wordlessly, Lysithea handed her the paper. There, splashed across the front page, was a photograph of Zephyra leaving the community center. Alongside a bold headline, "Missing Heiress Found, Zephyra Onyx Hiding in Coastal Town." The accompanying article quoted anonymous sources confirming her identity and detailed her relationship with local music teacher Caius Thornfield, whose own past as a tech billionaire raises questions about the coincidental nature of their connection. "Octavia," Zephyra whispered, the coffee mug nearly slipping from her suddenly numb fingers. "Presumably," Lysithea agreed, "but it hardly matters now. Your father's already on his way. private jet landed at the regional airport 20 minutes ago, and there are at least 3 news vans parked at the end of the beach path. The bubble of perfect contentment burst, reality rushing in with crushing force. I need to wake Caius, Zephyra said, setting down the mug with trembling hands, but Caius was already standing in the doorway, hastily dressed, his expression troubled. I heard, he said quietly. My assistant just called. Apparently they're outside my house too. Lysithea glanced between them, eyebrows raised slightly at Caius's overnight presence, but focusing on practicalities. You both need to decide how you want to handle this. It's going to be a circus. Before either could respond, the sound of tires on gravel announced another arrival. Through the window, Zephyra saw a sleek black sedan, her father's preferred vehicle. Her heart constricted painfully. He's here, she whispered, suddenly feeling like the uncertain daughter she'd spent months trying to outgrow. Caius moved to her side, finding her hand unerringly and squeezing it. Do you want me to stay? The question held layers of meaning. Beyond this immediate moment, Zephyra squeezed back. Yes, always. Vincent Onyx cut an imposing figure even at 65, tall and distinguished, silver hair immaculately styled, designer suit unwrinkled despite the journey. But as he stepped from the car, Zephyra noticed what the newspaper photos had suggested. He looked older, the lines around his eyes deeper, his usually ramrod posture slightly bent. She stepped onto the porch to meet him, acutely aware of her, informal attire and the curious onlookers gathering at a discreet distance. Zephyra, her father said, his typically commanding voice holding an unfamiliar note of relief. Thank God you're safe. Hello, father, she replied, the formal address feeling strange after months of freedom. His gaze moved past her to where Caius stood in the doorway and his expression hardened. I see the reports were accurate about more than your location. Zephyra stiffened. Caius Thornfield, my father, Vincent Onyx, she introduced tersely. Sir, Caius acknowledged with a slight nod, his bearing dignified despite the awkward circumstances. Vincent barely nodded in return. I'd like to speak with my daughter. Alone. Anything you have to say can be said in front of Caius, Zephyra countered, moving back to stand beside him. Something flashed in her father's eyes. Frustration, perhaps, or grudging respect for her. Newfound assertiveness. Very well. Your disappearance has caused considerable disruption, Zephyra. The company stock has dropped 15%. The board is questioning leadership stability. And your personal safety has been my primary concern for 97 days. The precise count revealed more about his worry than any emotional display could have. Zephyra felt a pang of guilt. I'm sorry for worrying you, but I needed this time. Father, I needed to discover who I am beyond the Onyx name. Vincent glanced around the modest cottage with barely concealed disdain. And this experiment has concluded to your satisfaction? It wasn't an experiment, she replied evenly. It was my life, a real life, where people valued me for myself, not for what I could do for them. Her father's expression softened fractionally. I've never seen you as merely an asset, Zephyra, despite what you may believe. You're my daughter, my only family. The simple statement, so uncharacteristic of her emotionally reserved father, caught Zephyra off guard. Before she could respond, Lysithea appeared from inside the cottage. The reporters are getting closer, she warned, and someone just posted your address online. If you want any privacy for this conversation, we should move it elsewhere. Vincent straightened his already impeccable tie. My hotel suite in the city is secure. We can speak there without interference. I'll come on one condition, Zephyra negotiated. Caius comes with me. Her father's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. Fine. My car is waiting. The drive to the city passed in tense silence. Zephyra sat between Caius and her father in the ago. spacious back seat, their shoulders occasionally brushing, Caius's touch a reassuring anchor, her father's stiff and unyielding. At the hotel, Vincent's security team cleared a path through the gathered media, hustling them into a private elevator. The presidential suite occupied the entire top floor, its opulent furnishings a stark contrast to Zephyr's cottage. "I'll give you privacy," Lysithea murmured, disappearing into one of the suite's many rooms after a supportive glance at Zephyra. Vincent poured himself a scotch from the bar cart, not offering one to either of his guests. "I've had the board postpone the quarterly meeting until next week. That gives us time to prepare a joint statement explaining your sabbatical in terms that won't further damage the company." "Is that all you care about?" Zephyra asked quietly. "The company's image?" Her father's hand tightened around his glass. "What I care about, Zephyra, is the legacy your mother and I built, the company that employs thousands of people who depend on its stability, the foundation that funds healthcare for underprivileged women worldwide." His response silenced her momentarily. In her quest for personal freedom, she had indeed overlooked the broader implications of her actions. "Mr. Onyx," Caius spoke for the first time since leaving the cottage, "if I may, your daughter didn't leave on a whim. She left because she felt trapped by expectations that demanded she be something other than herself." Vincent assessed Caius with shrewd eyes. "And you would know this how, Mr. Thornfield? From your extensive 3-month acquaintance while she was living under a false name? From recognizing in her the same struggle I faced after losing my sight," Caius replied evenly. "When everything that defined you is suddenly stripped away, you discover who you truly are beneath the labels and expectations." An uncomfortable silence followed, broken eventually by Vincent setting down his glass with deliberate precision. "I'm not unsympathetic to personal crises, Mr. Thornfield, but running away solves nothing." "I didn't run away," Zephyra corrected. "I ran toward something, toward authentic connection, toward work that fulfilled me, toward a life where I could breathe." Her father studied her face, something shifting in his expression. "You look like her when you're passionate about something," he said unexpectedly. "Your mother, she had that same fire." The comparison startled Zephyra. Her father rarely spoke of her mother, the grief of her loss still palpable 15 years later. "She would have understood what you're trying to say," Vincent continued, moving to the window to gaze out at the city skyline. "Isabella always accused me of being too concerned with legacy and not enough with living. The use of her mother's name, another rarity, created a momentary connection that Zephyra hadn't felt with her father in years, but the tentative bridge collapsed with his next words. Regardless, the situation now requires decisive action. The media speculation is already damaging. Your relationship with Mr. Thornfield adds an additional complication." Caius stiffened beside her. "I'm not a complication, Mr. Onyx. I love your daughter." Vincent turned, his expression coolly, assessing. "Love is rarely the issue in situations like ours, Mr. Thornfield. Compatibility of lifestyles, however, frequently is." "Father," Zephyra interjected, anger rising, "you don't get to dismiss what Caius and I have. You don't get to decide what's compatible with my life because you don't know what my life is anymore. I'm not the same person who left New York 3 months ago." Clearly, her father acknowledged with a thin smile. "The Zephyra I knew wouldn't have embarrassed herself and her family with a public spectacle." The words stung precisely as intended. Zephyra rose from the sofa, fists clenched at her sides. "The Zephyra you knew was suffocating under the weight of your expectations. She was marrying a man who saw her as a business transaction. She was becoming exactly what everyone wanted, except herself." Her father's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or simple surprise at her vehemence. "I need some air," Zephyra declared, turning toward the terrace doors. "Zephyra," Caius said softly, reaching for her hand as she passed. "Remember what we discussed last night. Your truth, your terms." She squeezed his fingers gratefully before stepping onto the terrace, the city sprawling beneath her in a landscape of glass and steel so different from the natural rhythms of Seabrook. The door opened behind her, and her father joined her at the railing. "He seems to care for you," Vincent observed after a moment of silence. "He loves me," Zephyra corrected. "And I love him," her father sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 65 years. "I want you to be happy, Zephyra. I've always wanted that. I just doubt your definition and mine align." "They don't have to," she replied softly. "That's what I learned in Seabrook. My happiness doesn't depend on your approval anymore." Vincent studied her profile. "You've changed." "I've grown." Another silence stretched between them, less hostile than before. Finally, Vincent spoke again. "The board expects you back at the company. The succession plan has always included you. And if I choose a different path?" Her father's hands tightened on the railing. "That would be disappointing, but not insurmountable." It was as close to acceptance as she could expect from him. Zephyra nodded, neither agreeing nor refusing, allowing the possibility to exist between them unresolved. When they returned inside, Caius was on his phone, his expression grave. He ended the call as they entered. "What is it?" Zephyra asked, sensing his tension. "Octavia," he replied grimly. "She's given an exclusive interview to the national press. It's already online." Vincent retrieved his tablet, scanning the article with growing displeasure. "This is problematic." He handed the device to Zephyra, who read aloud for Caius's benefit. "Star-crossed billionaires find love in hiding exclusive. Details on the secret romance between cosmetics heiress Zephyra Onyx and blind tech mogul Caius Thornfield." She skimmed further, her stomach clenching at the fabricated details, insinuations of corporate espionage, and veiled suggestions that their relationship had begun before her disappearance as part of an elaborate scheme. "It's all lies," she said, setting down the tablet with shaking hands. "Truth is irrelevant in the court of public opinion," her father responded, years of media management evident in his tone. "Perception is everything." Caius stood, finding his way to Zephyra with confident steps born of memorizing the room's layout. "We have two choices," he said firmly. "We can hide and let others control the narrative, or we can face this together on our terms." "The damage is already substantial," Vincent objected. "Further exposure will happen with or without our participation," Caius interrupted. "But we can shape it." Zephyra looked between the two men. Her father, the embodiment of careful calculation and strategic thinking, and Caius, who had taught her the value of authentic living regardless of consequences. The choice seemed to embody everything about the woman she had been and the woman she had become. "Caius is right," she decided. "No more hiding, no more letting others define who I am or what my choices mean." As if summoned by her declaration, Lysithea reappeared, phone in hand. "You might want to see this." She held out the device, displaying a video already going viral across social platforms. In it, Octavia stood before a bank of microphones, her practiced smile belied by the calculation in her eyes. "I felt it was my duty to come forward," she was saying. "Having known both Zephyra and Caius personally, I had concerns about their sudden connection. The timing seemed suspicious at best, potentially indicative of corporate collusion at worst." Zephyra watched in horror as the woman continued, spinning a web of implications and half-truths that cast her relationship with Caius in the worst possible light. "She's trying to destroy us," she whispered, "because she couldn't have you." Caius's expression darkened. "She's trying, but she'll fail." Vincent surprisingly nodded in agreement. "Mr. Thornfield is correct. This type of character assassination requires direct confrontation. He straightened his jacket with the air of a general preparing for battle. "I'll have my PR team arrange a press conference for tomorrow morning. We'll present a united front." For the first time, Zephyrus saw her father and Caius not as adversaries, but as allies united by a common purpose, protecting her. The realization was both comforting and sobering. "Tomorrow it is," she agreed, "but tonight I need to return to Seabrook. There are people there, Eleanor, the children at the community center, who deserve to hear the truth from me, not from sensationalized news reports." Vincent looked as though he might object, but instead inclined his head slightly. "As you wish. My security team will accompany you." As arrangements were made for their return to Seabrook, Zephyra found a moment alone with Caius in one of the suite's sitting areas. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. "Standing beside me publicly means returning to the spotlight you've avoided for 5 years." Caius reached for her hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that still made her heart skip. "I'm not going anywhere, Zephira Onyx. Not unless you ask me to." The conviction in his voice should have reassured her. Instead, a strange premonition settled in her chest, a sense that despite their newfound honesty with each other, the path ahead contained challenges they could not yet foresee. "I love you," she told him, the words still new enough to carry profound weight. "And I love you," he replied simply. "The rest is just noise." But as they prepared to face the media storm brewing around them, Zephira couldn't shake the feeling that the truth, finally unveiled in its entirety, might yet prove more complicated than either of them anticipated. Chapter 8. Reconciliation with the Past. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of press conferences, legal meetings, and difficult decisions. After their united front at the initial media briefing, Zephira reluctantly returned to New York to address the business implications of her absence. The Onyx corporate headquarters felt foreign to her now. Sitting in the boardroom where she'd slammed her palm against the table months ago, Zephira hardly recognized herself in that frustrated heiress. She was someone different now, stronger, clearer in her purpose. "The succession plan needs revision," she told her father after a particularly contentious meeting with the board. "I won't be the figurehead CEO you've been grooming me to be." Vincent's expression remained carefully neutral. "What do you propose instead?" "I want to lead our product development division and rebrand our philanthropic arm," she replied, the idea crystallizing as she spoke. "Focus on accessibility initiatives and ethical sourcing, projects with meaning beyond profit margins." Her father studied her with newfound respect. "You've thought about this." "Every day since I left," she admitted. "I don't reject my responsibility to Onyx entirely. I just need to fulfill it on my terms." Their compromise emerged gradually. Zephira would return to the company in a capacity that utilized her creativity and newfound social consciousness, while Vincent would groom a different successor for the CEO position. What Zephira hadn't anticipated was how difficult the separation from Caius would be. He had remained in Seabrook, continuing his work at the community center while managing the renewed media interest in his own story. "I miss you," she told him during their nightly video calls, the technology a poor substitute for his physical presence. "New York feels empty without you." "Then fill it," he encouraged. "Make it yours again, but differently this time." Taking his advice, Zephira began reimagining her life in the city. She moved from her father's Upper East Side mansion to a loft in Brooklyn with space for a proper art studio. She invited her former instructors from the Art Students League to critique her work, developing her talents beyond mere hobby status. Most significantly, she established the Phoenix Foundation, named for her mother's maiden name, dedicated to arts accessibility and medical research. The Foundation's first major initiative, funding experimental treatments for vision restoration. "You didn't tell me," Caius said when he discovered her involvement through his doctor. It wasn't about you, she explained. Or rather, not just about you. Meeting you showed me how arbitrary the barriers are that we place between people with different abilities. The foundation is about breaking down those barriers. 4 weeks into their separation, Zephira received a call that changed everything. Ms. Onyx, Dr. Patel's accented voice held barely contained excitement. The protocols your foundation funded, we're seeing unprecedented success rates in the preliminary trials. Mr. Thornfield would be an excellent candidate for the procedure. Zephira's heart raced. Have you told him? I'm calling him next, but as the benefactor, I wanted you to know first. She booked a flight to Seabrook that evening, arriving on Caius's doorstep unannounced. When he opened the door, his face registered momentary confusion before breaking into a radiant smile. I'd know that perfume anywhere, he said, drawing her into his arms. What brings you back without warning? Did Dr. Patel call you? She asked, searching his face for signs of his reaction. His expression grew serious. Yes, just an hour ago. And I've scheduled the consultation for next week. His hands found hers. I'm scared, Zephira, not of the procedure itself, but of what it might mean. What do you mean? He led her to the deck where they'd first shared conversation months before. For 5 years, I've built an identity around my blindness. It's shaped how I experience the world, how I create music, how I connect with people, including you. You're worried it will change us, she realized. Terrified, he admitted. What if seeing you changes how I feel? What if it doesn't match the image I've created in my mind? What if you look at me differently when I can look back? Zephira placed her palm against his cheek. Caius, I fell in love with your soul. That won't change whether you can see me or not. Their reunion that night held a poignancy beyond physical desire, a recognition that they stood at another threshold of transformation, the outcome uncertain but faced together. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of medical consultations, procedures, and anxious waiting. The treatment wasn't guaranteed, the doctors emphasized repeatedly. Partial restoration was the best possible outcome, and even that wasn't certain. Throughout it all, Zephira divided her time between New York and Seabrook, building her new role at Onyx while supporting Caius through the ordeal. Their relationship deepened through the stress, each challenge reinforcing the foundation they'd built on honesty and mutual respect. 2 months after the initial procedure, Caius called Zephira in the middle of a product development meeting. I saw the sun rise this morning, he said without preamble, his voice thick with emotion. Just shapes and colors, nothing distinct. But Zephira, light. I saw light. She excused herself from the meeting, ignoring her father's disapproving glance. I'm coming, she told Caius. Right now. As the treatments progressed, Caius's vision improved incrementally, never approaching full sight, but granting him shadows, then blurry forms, then eventually enough visual perception to navigate familiar spaces without his cane. Through it, all the Phoenix Foundation garnered positive press that helped restore the Onyx brand's reputation. Vincent, seeing his daughter flourish in her new role, gradually released his grip on controlling her choices. You were right, he admitted during a rare, vulnerable moment, about needing to find your own way. Your mother would be proud of the woman you've become. The words, so long withheld, healed something in Zephira she hadn't realized was still broken. With both feet firmly planted in her reconciled past and her chosen future, she moved forward with newfound certainty. The path ahead, once obscured by expectations and fear, now shone with clarity and purpose. Chapter 9. Finding the Way Back. 6 months after beginning the experimental treatments, Caius stood in his doctor's office receiving news that once would have seemed impossible. The improvement has plateaued, Dr. Patel explained, reviewing the latest scan results. You'll likely maintain this level of vision, about 30% functionality in your left eye, 20% in your right, but further, significant improvement is unlikely. It's more than I ever expected, Caius replied honestly. The partial vision he'd regained had transformed his daily life in countless ways, though he still relied on his other senses for fine details. The Phoenix Foundation Gala next week would be an excellent opportunity to share your success story, Dr. Patel suggested. As one of our most prominent patients, your testimony could help secure funding for others. Caius nodded thoughtfully. He hadn't attended a formal event since before his accident, preferring the quiet anonymity of Seabrook to the glaring spotlight of society functions. But this was different. This was Zephyr's foundation, her vision brought to life. "I'll be there," he promised. The call to Zephyra later that day was filled with logistics and planning. She'd been in New York for nearly 3 weeks, their longest separation since his treatments began, overseeing final preparations for the Foundation's inaugural gala. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "These events can be overwhelming, even for people who haven't spent years avoiding them." "I'm ready," he assured her, "and I have significant motivation seeing you in person again." Their relationship had evolved during his treatment, growing stronger through the challenges of distance and change. Zephyra had refused to be present for his first post-treatment moments of sight, insisting that his healing journey shouldn't be about her. Instead, she'd waited patiently until he felt ready, allowing him to adjust to his new perceptual reality without pressure. Now, as Caius packed for New York, he felt both excitement and trepidation. His vision, while vastly improved, remained limited. Colors appeared muted, faces were often indistinct unless very close, and he still navigated unfamiliar spaces with caution. Yet the prospect of seeing Zephyra, really seeing her beyond the indistinct video calls they'd shared, filled him with nervous anticipation. The evening of the gala arrived with uncharacteristic speed. Caius adjusted his bow tie in the hotel mirror, the motions familiar from his pre-accident days despite the blurry reflection. "Cars waiting, Mr. Thornfield," his assistant called from the sitting room. The venue was a historic Manhattan building transformed for the evening into an elegant showcase of the Foundation's work. As Caius entered, he was struck by the kaleidoscope of colors and shapes, overwhelming after the simpler visual environment of Seabrook. He paused, orienting himself amidst the sensory input. "Caius Thornfield," a familiar voice approached. "Welcome back to civilization." The blurry figure resolved into Harrison Wells, Vincent Onyx's silver-haired CFO. "Harrison," Caius acknowledged with a polite handshake. "Good to see you again. Literally, in this case." "Remarkable progress, I've heard. The Onyx family's foundation made that possible, I understand." "Zephyra's foundation," Caius corrected gently. "And yes, without her vision and determination, many of us would still be in darkness." Harrison's expression shifted subtly. "She's changed considerably since her sabbatical. Vincent has had to adjust his expectations." "Sometimes expectations need adjustment," Caius replied, scanning the room for Zephyra, despite knowing she wouldn't appear until the formal presentation. The evening progressed with speeches from researchers, testimonials from patients, and generous pledges from donors moved by the Foundation's mission. Caius found himself drawn into conversations about potential adaptive technology applications, his own innovations from before his accident suddenly relevant again in new contexts. Then the room hushed as Vincent Onyx took the stage. "Tonight represents not just the launch of an important foundation," he began, his commanding presence unchanged from Caius's memories. "It represents the evolution of the Onyx legacy into something more meaningful than profit margins and market share." Vincent's gaze swept the room, landing briefly on Caius. Sometimes we need our children to show us a better path. I'm proud to introduce the visionary behind the Phoenix Foundation, my daughter, Zephyrah Onyx. The spotlight shifted, and Zephyrah appeared in a sweep of emerald silk. Caius's breath caught as he truly saw her for the first time. His mind had constructed an image from touch and description, but reality exceeded imagination. Her luminous, amber eyes, the proud set of her shoulders, the subtle smile that transformed her elegant features with warmth. As she spoke passionately about the Foundation's mission, Caius watched transfixed. This was the woman he loved, not the cosmetics heiress or the art teacher in hiding, but this powerful, compassionate force whose vision extended far beyond herself. Her eyes found him in the crowd, her smile deepening momentarily before she continued her address. In that brief exchange, Caius understood that whatever changes his partial sight might bring to their relationship, the core connection remained unaltered. After the presentations concluded and the event shifted to mingling, Caius found himself separated from Zephyrah by well-meaning donors and curious social climbers. He navigated the crowd carefully, his vision still unreliable in the dimly lit room. "She's quite remarkable." The voice beside him froze Caius in place. Octavia Rain, her distinctive perfume confirming her identity before his limited vision. "Hey, good. What are you doing here?" he asked quietly. "I was invited," she replied. "The Rains have always supported worthy causes, especially when they're attached to prominent names." Caius turned to face her, finding her features more clearly than he expected. The calculating eyes unchanged, despite the apologetic smile he remembered from their last encounter. "If you're here to cause trouble, I'm here to make amends," she interrupted. "What I did was inexcusable. Jealousy is an ugly emotion, Caius, he corrected firmly, "and forgiveness requires genuine remorse, Octavia. I haven't seen evidence of that." She stepped closer. "I was wrong to leave when you needed me most. Seeing you with her, seeing how she stayed despite everything, made me realize what I threw away." "You never had what Zephyrah and I share," Caius replied without malice. "You wanted the successful entrepreneur, not the man beneath. When one disappeared, so did your interest. And now," she challenged softly, "now that your sight is returning, your foundation being re-established, who's to say she's not with you for the same reasons?" The insinuation might once have planted seeds of doubt. Now Caius merely shook his head. "Goodbye, Octavia. I wish you well, but we have nothing further to discuss." As he turned away, he nearly collided with Zephyrah, who had approached silently. During their exchange, her expression, now visible to him in a way it hadn't been before, held no jealousy or doubt, only calm certainty. "Ms. Rain," she acknowledged with professional courtesy. "Thank you for supporting our foundation tonight. If you'll excuse us, I need to introduce Caius to some of our researchers." She led him away with gentle pressure on his arm, navigating through the crowd with practiced ease. "You heard," he noted when they reached a quieter alcove. "Enough," she confirmed. "Are you all right?" Caius smiled, taking advantage of their relative privacy to study her face more closely. "I'm perfect," he said honestly. Really seeing you, is better than I imagined." Her expression softened. "And, do I match the picture in your mind?" "You exceed it," he told her, reaching to touch her cheek in the gesture that had become their private language. "But more importantly, seeing your face only confirms what I already knew through touch, through voice, through heart, that you're the most beautiful soul I've ever encountered." The moment crystallized between them, a recognition that sight, while precious, was merely one way they saw each other. Their connection transcended physical perception, rooted in something far more profound. Later that night, as they stood on the balcony of Zephyrah's loft, watching the city lights blur into a tapestry of color and shadow, Caius realized that finding his way back from darkness had never really been about regaining his sight. It had been about finding Zephyra, the one person who had seen him clearly even when he couldn't see himself. Chapter 10. Love Without Disguise. 1 year to the day after Zephyra had first followed the sound of piano music down a beach in Seabrook. She stood at the shoreline again, watching waves crash against the sand. The cottage she'd rented during her escape was visible in the distance, now occupied by another tenant seeking their own fresh start. So much had changed in 12 months. She divided her time between New York and Seabrook now, balancing her role at Onyx with community work that kept her grounded. The Phoenix Foundation had expanded its initiatives beyond vision research to address accessibility issues more broadly. Most importantly, she and Caius had built a partnership that bridged their two worlds, rather than forcing either to abandon their own. Penny for your thoughts? Caius approached from behind, his footsteps sure on the familiar terrain. His vision, stabilized at partial functionality, allowed him to navigate known environments with confidence while still requiring assistance in unfamiliar settings. Just reflecting, she replied, leaning into him as his arms encircled her waist. Hard to believe it's been a year since I was standing right here, feeling utterly lost. And now I know exactly where I belong, she answered, turning in his embrace to face him. His eyes found hers, still not with perfect clarity, but with enough vision to connect in a way that once seemed impossible. I have something to show you, he said, taking her hand. An anniversary surprise. Curious, Zephyra allowed him to lead her up the beach path toward his house. As they approached, she noticed subtle changes to the property. New plantings along the walkway, solar-powered, lights marking the steps. Close your eyes, he instructed when they reached the door. Isn't that usually my line? She teased, but complied. He guided her through the familiar space of his home, the scent of fresh paint and new wood mingling with the ever-present ocean breeze. When they stopped, she could sense they were in a room she hadn't visited recently. Okay, he said, his voice betraying nervous excitement. Look! Zephyra opened her eyes to find herself in a completely transformed space. The formerly unused guest room had been converted into a fully equipped art studio, with north-facing windows, maximizing natural light, custom storage for supplies, and an easel positioned to capture the ocean view. Caius, she breathed, taking in the thoughtful details. This is extraordinary. I realized you've been creating spaces for me in your life, he explained, splitting your time between New York and here, establishing the foundation that bridges our worlds. I wanted you to have a space that's entirely yours within my home. The gesture touched her deeply, not just the physical space, but the recognition of her need for creative self-expression, even within their shared life. There's more, he added, leading her to a small velvet box on the workbench. Inside lay a simple key on a silver chain. What's this? She asked. The original idea was a ring, Caius admitted, with a self-deprecating smile. But that seemed presumptuous. This is a key to the house, a standing invitation, not an expectation, your choice always. Zephyra recognized the deeper significance, Caius offering commitment without confinement, partnership without possession. It perfectly embodied the relationship they'd built, where independence and togetherness coexisted without contradiction. It's perfect, she told him, slipping the chain around her neck. Though I wouldn't have refused a ring, for the record. His expression brightened, noted for future reference. Later that evening, they hosted a small gathering on Caius's deck, Eleanor from the gallery, Lysithia visiting from New York, and several of the children from the community center with their families. Vincent Onyx made a brief appearance, his gradual acceptance of their relationship evolving into something approaching respect. As sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues that Caius could now partially appreciate, Zephyra watched the unlikely assembly of people from different chapters of her life converging in harmony. The contrast with her old life, compartmentalized, performance-oriented, fundamentally lonely despite constant company, couldn't have been starker. "You've created something remarkable here," her father commented quietly, joining her at the railing. "Both of you." The acknowledgement, simple but sincere, represented significant growth in their relationship. "Thank you for seeing that," she replied. "It matters to me that you do." Vincent studied his daughter's face. "Your mother would have approved. She always valued authenticity above all else." As he departed with a promise to call regarding their next foundation initiative, Zephyra felt another piece of her past and present align into greater wholeness. The party concluded as stars appeared, guests departing with warm embraces until only Zephyra and Caius remained, swaying gently to music only they could hear, as they had on so many nights before. "A year ago I was hiding from the world," she mused, her cheek against his chest. "From myself, really. And I was hiding behind my blindness," he acknowledged, "using it as a shield against having to engage with life again. Look how far we've—" Come," she said, drawing back to meet his gaze. Caius's fingers traced her features in the familiar gesture that had first bridged the space between them. "Some things haven't changed. I still see you most clearly this way." The touch, once born of necessity, had evolved into their private language, a reminder that true perception transcended ordinary sight. Later, as moonlight silvered the waves, visible from Caius's bedroom, they lay entwined in comfortable silence. Zephyra's thoughts drifted to the unlikely series of events that had brought them together: her impulsive flight from privilege, his retreat from public life after losing, his sight, the storm that had first drawn them into each other's arms. "What are you thinking?" Caius murmured, sensitive as always to shifts in her mood. "That sometimes the universe has better plans than we do," she replied. "If you'd told me a year ago that running away would lead me home, I wouldn't have believed it." He smiled, drawing her closer. "If you'd told me that losing my sight would help me truly see for the first time, I would have said the same." Their journey had been unconventional by any standard. From heiress in disguise and blind billionaire to partners who had learned to navigate both darkness and light together. The path forward would hold new challenges, certainly, but they would face them as they had all others, with honesty, compassion, and the profound understanding that love without disguise was the greatest gift either could give or receive. As Zephyra drifted towards sleep in Caius's arms, she realized that the girl who had fled Manhattan in desperate search of authenticity had found not just herself, but something even more precious. Someone who saw her completely, without judgment or expectation, and loved her, not despite her. Complexities, but because of them. In the end, that was the truest sight of all.